Last April, several OPEC Plus countries began cutting oil production. They've extended those cuts through December 2024, and this week added even more. The nations will reduce production by a combined 2.2 million barrels per day through June. The U.S. Department of Energy says the production changes are an effort to stabilize oil prices. Prices bottomed out in 2020 during COVID shutdowns when there was reduced demand. They peaked in the summer of 2022 following Western sanctions on Russia in rebuke of its invasion of Ukraine. For more on how this affects us, we're joined by Jeff Colgan. He's the director of the Climate Solutions Lab at Brown University. Thank you so much for joining us. So, Saudi Arabia and Russia have extended this oil supply reduction through June. The U.S. has boosted its own production, setting 3 monthly records in 2023. So with those two facts out there, what's happening in the oil markets?
Well, thanks for having me on, John. And the truth is OPEC is facing big problems in the world oil market. I would say four, and I'll go through them quite quickly. One is that the U.S. production of oil and gas has hit a historic high in 2023. So with U.S. oil producers just providing enormous amounts of supply, that's real competition for OPEC producers. Second problem is climate change, that in the Northern Hemisphere, our winter has been very mild, and so people aren't using as much heating oil to heat their homes and their buildings. That reduces oil demand. Third problem is China's economy is sputtering right now, and increasingly, Chinese customers are buying electric vehicles, which don't run on gasoline, and therefore depress demand for oil. And fourth problem is Russia is, as you know, facing a war with Ukraine. Ukraine has managed to damage some of the Russian refineries. And so Russia has decided to scale back its oil production because it's not confident that it can refine that oil. So four big problems for OPEC to try to manage. And they're cutting this oil production in an attempt to try to prop up the oil price. But even after the announcement, the price of oil is actually falling.
So we are in an election year, and the number of times gas prices gets mentioned is hard to count. It gets mentioned so much. How do those changes you just discussed affect gas prices? Well, I'll stop there. How will they affect gas prices, let's say, for the next year, do you think?
Yeah, well, what's happening is actually good news for American consumers in that the falling price of oil means eventually a falling price of gasoline, right? Gasoline is made from oil, and so when the inputs get cheaper, then eventually gasoline does as well. And that's good news typically for an incumbent president. And Joe Biden and his team they've done some really smart moves on energy to reduce the price of gasoline from where it was in the summer of 2022. They released some oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to bring down that price. They released it when prices were high, and then they refilled the Strategic Petroleum Reserve when prices came down, right? So the government actually makes a profit by selling high and refilling when it's low. And on top of that, it's great for the American consumer because it levels out that price, brings down those price shocks, and really helps the U.S. economy. That's one of those good news stories that you don't hear a lot about, but is a really important facet of what's happened.
Well, it's one of the reasons we wanted to talk about it. We usually cover the price when it hits the ceiling, and in this moment we're in, we thought we'd take a look at where things actually are. So let's. Now, I wanted former President Trump on the campaign trail. His economic policy is essentially, he says, drill, baby, drill, which is more than just talking about gas. He has he has a lot of economic things he thinks will flow from that. What would more oil, what would more drilling do for gas prices or in this oil market?
Well, look, in the short term, fine. The world needs oil, and so it makes sense that if American producers can produce it, great. Let's let them do that. But in the long term, we need to get off of fossil fuels. We need to stop producing so much oil and gas because we are burning our planet, right? We are creating climate change. And so we need a plan to move our economy away from oil and gas. And that's something that the Trump campaign has offered, absolutely no ideas on. If anything, they're just denying that there's a problem completely. They're burying their hands in the sand. And so this idea of drill, baby, drill, it's just, it doesn't make any long-term strategic sense for the United States.
Is there any way in which in a short term it makes any kind of sense with respect to that market you were talking about? If competition from the U.S. is helping lower the price, presumably more competition would drive the price even lower. Everything you said about the environment notwithstanding.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can see that under the Biden administration, oil and gas production in the United States has actually hit an all-time high. And you never hear that, of course, from the oil and gas industry. They complain about Biden all the time, but they've done very well under the Biden administration because I think that the team there understands that there's both a short-term problem and a long-term problem. In short term, we need the oil and gas because we have to transition, we have to power off our economy. But on the long term, we need to move to renewable energy, right? We need to move to hydropower, solar, wind, geothermal. And laying the foundation for that kind of economy is something that's going to take years, maybe even decades to really do. So we have to start that.
Jeff Colgan, director of the Climate Solutions Lab at Brown University. Thank you.